The hum of military-grade jet engines isn't something you expect to hear over a sleepy, freezing American suburb. We are talking about October 1984, Macomb County, Michigan, a Rust Belt community where everyone knows everyone, where the autumn air bites at your face, and where a 10-year-old boy has just vanished off the face of the earth. The local police department was so desperate, so terrified of what was happening in the dark woods just past the county line, that they literally called in the United States Air Force. They put tactical reconnaissance jets in the sky, outfitting them with classified experimental thermal imaging equipment, usually reserved for the height of the Cold War. All of this just to search the freezing Michigan tree lines for the heat signature of one small boy. But the answer wasn't in the sky. If you look at these faded, yellowing case files sitting right here on the desk, the real answer was hiding inside a massive, humming IBM mainframe. A database of over 155,000 registered vehicles. The sheer scale of this manhunt was completely unprecedented for the era, and when they finally narrowed that mountain of punch card data down to a single suspect, the battle didn't end with a dramatic shootout on a highway. The real climax of the largest, most agonizing investigation in Michigan's history happened in a stifling, windowless interrogation room under the hum of a flickering fluorescent bulb. A detective had to sit down, pour a cup of stale coffee, start the reels of a cassette recorder, and pretend to be the absolute best friend of a monster. I'm looking at the declassified case file right now. Over 50 pages of heavily redacted field reports, cracked Polaroids, and psychological profiles typed out on heavy carbon paper. We are going to break down exactly how this 1984 investigation unfolded, piece by piece. Because this wasn't just a search for a missing child. This was a masterclass in forensic architecture, psychological warfare, and the terrifying realization that the perfect suburban neighbor might be hunting right in your backyard. Let's set the scene. It's Friday evening, late October 1984, the industrial outskirts of Detroit. The air is already carrying that heavy, damp chill of an incoming Michigan winter. 10-year-old Mirko is out with his friends. If you look at the family photos from the file, he's a bright, energetic kid. He loves playing football, riding his bike, and collecting model tractors. He wants to be a farmer when he grows up. He's just a normal, happy kid living a normal American life. He's at a local skate park, hanging out with his buddies, and around 8:30 in the evening, he hops on his Schwinn Stingray bicycle to make the 15-minute ride home. You can practically see the scene through the lens of an old Super 8 camera. The quiet, unlit county roads, the crunch of gravel. His parents, Sandra and Richard, are waiting at home. The porch light is on. By 9 o'clock, the mother is looking out the window. By 9:30, that quiet suburban anxiety starts creeping in. She goes to the heavy rotary phone on the kitchen wall. She calls the friend's mother. The voice on the other end of the line says the words that instantly turn a mother's blood to ice. He left over an hour ago. He should be home by now. That is the exact moment the nightmare begins. The worst possible scenario a parent can imagine is no longer a fear. It is an active reality. The boy is gone. Within hours, the local precinct is completely mobilized. Cruisers are rolling down the rural routes with their high beams cutting through the dark. And then, just off the shoulder of a dark, narrow dirt road, illuminated by the harsh glare of a police flashlight, they find it. Mirko's bicycle. Just lying there in the weeds. No boy, no struggle, just the bike. For the parents, it is the beginning of a suffocating, terrifying uncertainty. For the detectives looking at that abandoned bicycle, the stakes instantly skyrocket. This is a race against time. The immediate question echoing through the precinct halls is terrifying. Can Mirko still be found alive? And even worse, if a predator is operating on these quiet Michigan backroads, will he strike again? The community is utterly defenseless. The task force starts pulling in every available officer. We are talking about 300 boots on the ground by Saturday morning. They are walking shoulder to shoulder through the wet autumn leaves, checking under bridges, along drainage ditches, and deep into the dense woods. But they need a lead. They need witnesses. And sitting in the faded interview transcripts typed out that weekend, we find the first crucial thread. Two local teenagers were driving home from a high school football game that Friday night. They were coming right down that exact stretch of dirt road. They tell the detectives that they saw something strange. Through the dark, they saw the flickering light of a bicycle lamp swaying erratically on the shoulder. They thought maybe it was just a drunk guy riding home from a bar. They actually slowed down to help, but as they got closer, they saw a car pulled over right next to the bike. It was too dark to see any faces. They couldn't make out license plates, but they saw the distinct glow of the car's taillights. The lead detective presses them. What kind of car? One of the teenagers happens to be a gearhead. He recognizes the specific, unmistakable shape of those rear lights. He tells the police it was a Volkswagen station wagon, a newer model, maybe an 82 or 83 Quantum, the American equivalent of the Passat B6 variant. He is absolutely certain about the make and the body style. He couldn't see the color because of the pitch-black night, but he knows the car. This is the turning point in the physical investigation. But look at the scale of the problem here in 1984. They contact the Department of Motor Vehicles and the manufacturer. The data comes back on massive reams of dot matrix printer paper. There are over 155,000 of these specific station wagons registered across the region. 155,000 needles in a continent-sized haystack. You can't pull over every single one. You can't search them all. The logistics are impossible. But the detective in charge, a hardened investigator who has seen the worst of humanity, makes a promise to the parents. He sits in their living room, looks them in the eye, and vows that he will not stop until he finds their boy. This promise forces the task force to innovate in ways that were completely unheard of for local law enforcement in the 80s. They request military assistance. They manage to secure Air Force tactical reconnaissance jets from a nearby Air National Guard base. These planes are equipped with state-of-the-art forward-looking infrared, or FLIR, thermal cameras designed to spot Soviet tanks moving in the dark. The jets roar over the Macomb County forests, scanning the freezing ground for the heat signature of a small human body. The detectives are on the ground, listening to the radio crackle as the pilots call out hotspots. They rush into the woods with flashlights drawn, hearts pounding in their chests. But every time, it's a false alarm. A sun-warmed metal roof of a hunting blind, a dead deer, nothing. The technology is brilliant, but the woods are too vast, and the boy is just gone. Then, the investigation takes a devastating turn. A few days later, miles away from where the bicycle was found, a sanitation worker is emptying a rusted trash barrel near a commuter parking lot. He finds a pair of boys' sweatpants. They are Mirko's. Over the next 48 hours, a grim trail of evidence is uncovered. Poring over these crime scene photos is haunting. You see a Polaroid of a blood-stained polo shirt discarded in the damp grass. You see one of his sneakers. And then, the piece of evidence that changes the entire classification of the case. They find his boxer shorts. You don't need a degree in criminology to understand what that means. The lead investigator notes in the file that finding the most intimate piece of clothing is the absolute confirmation that they are no longer looking for a runaway. They are looking for a sexual sadist and a murderer. The optimism in the precinct dies on the spot. But this trail of clothing gives the FBI profiler brought onto the case a massive piece of the puzzle. Look at the map pinned to the corkboard in the background of these archive photos. The bicycle was found here, to the south, but the clothing is found miles to the north, scattered along a specific route. And all the clothing is found on the right side of the road, on the passenger side. The profiler reads this data like a book. The killer grabbed the boy, drove north, committed the unspeakable crime, and then turned around and drove back south. As he was driving, he was throwing the clothes out the passenger window. Why is he throwing them out? Why not take them home and burn them in a fireplace where no one would ever find them? The profiler answers this with chilling clarity, panic, and presence of mind. The killer couldn't risk bringing bloody clothes into his own home. Why? Because he doesn't live alone. He has a wife. Maybe he has kids. He is terrified of being caught by his own family. This single deduction shifts the entire manhunt. They aren't looking for a transient drifter sleeping in his car. They are looking for a local, a family man, a guy who mows his lawn, pays his taxes, and lives right here in the community. The monster is a neighbor. The police realize they have to use the community to flush him out. They set up massive billboards along the local highways. They organize a televised press conference. In an era when local news dominated the evening, they convinced Mirko's parents to sit under the hot studio lights and speak directly to the camera. The mother, pale and exhausted, stares into the lens and begs the killer to tell them where their son is. She says, "I know something terrible has happened. I worry if he is freezing, if he is hungry, if he is calling for me. Please, give us back our child, or at least tell us where we can find him so we can say goodbye." The emotional impact of that broadcast is like a shockwave. The precinct switchboards completely light up. The task force swells from 30 to 80 officers just to handle the hundreds of ringing phones. But amidst the noise, the false sightings, the well-meaning psychics, and the paranoia, the detectives are secretly waiting for the killer to slip up. They are running patrol cars past radar traps every night, hoping the station wagon drives by. And then comes the technological breakthrough that feels decades ahead of its time. In late 1983, the very first commercial cellular network was launched in the United States by Ameritech, right in the Detroit region. It was incredibly rare. Only high-level corporate executives or tech specialists had these bulky, heavy car phones. The detectives get a warrant to pull the primitive, rudimentary ping data from the early telecom switchboards in the area. They are looking for any mobile signal that bounced off the local towers on the exact night Mirko vanished, specifically tracking along the route where the clothes were dumped. They are sorting through 240,000 phone records. This isn't done with a modern search algorithm. This is done by exhausted detectives drinking black coffee, running rulers down endless columns of dot matrix printouts. And then, at 3 in the morning, a detective's finger stops on the page. There is one number, one single car phone number that logged onto the network, pinging the exact sequence of towers, perfectly matching the route and the timeline of the discarded clothing. They trace the number. It belongs to an employee of a regional telecommunications company, a man who was issued a corporate car phone to test the new networks. They run his name through the system. Gert Hansen, 45 years old, married to his third wife, raising 2 children, no criminal record, no history of violence, not even a parking ticket. He is a ghost in the system. But then, they cross-reference his name with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Gert Hansen was issued a company vehicle, a 1982 Volkswagen station wagon. The trap snaps shut. This is the moment the hair stands up on the back of your neck. The man the entire state of Michigan has been hunting for months is a middle management telecom employee who lives just a few miles away. One of the officers on the search team actually knows him. They are neighbors. The officer sits in the precinct, staring at the suspect's file, completely paralyzed by the realization that he has been borrowing tools from a man who murdered a child. But the police know they cannot just kick his door down. A circumstantial telecom ping and a matching car model won't hold up in a 1980s courtroom. They need hard, irrefutable forensic evidence. They quietly locate the vehicle. Hansen had actually returned the station wagon to the company fleet shortly after the murder, claiming it had mechanical issues, and the company had already sold it to a used car dealer across state lines. The detectives track it down, impound it, and tear it apart. Deep in the fibers of the passenger seat, the forensics team finds the microscopic truth: 2 tiny strands of fabric. They match the material of Mirko's sweatpants perfectly. and tucked into the trunk lining, an invisible trace of DNA. The lab confirms it. It is a dead match. At 6 in the morning, a quiet, unmarked sedan pulls up to Gert Hansen's perfectly manicured suburban lawn. No sirens, no SWAT teams. The detective who knows him walks up, knocks on the door, and calmly asks him to come down to the station. Hansen plays the part of the confused, compliant citizen perfectly. He sits in the interrogation room, wearing a pressed shirt, acting slightly annoyed but cooperative. This is where the psychological architecture of the case becomes absolutely brilliant. If you listen to the audio cassettes of this interrogation, the lead detective does not yell. He does not slam his fists on the table. He knows that Hansen is a highly intelligent, narcissistic corporate operator. If they pressure him, he will lawyer up and shut down completely. Instead, the detective employs a non-confrontational, almost terrifyingly friendly strategy. The detective pours him water. He asks about his kids. He talks to him man to man. He says, "Gert, I know you. I know you're not a monster. Something went wrong that night, didn't it? You have kids of your own. You know what it feels like to love a child. Mirko's parents just want to bring their boy home. They just want to bury him. You can help them do that. You can be the one to give them peace." The detective is essentially giving the killer psychological permission to confess without completely shattering his ego. He is allowing Hansen to reframe himself not as a brutal child murderer, but as a guy who made a tragic mistake and is now doing the right thing. It is a masterful, manipulative dance. For 9 grueling days they talk, and slowly, the pristine, perfect facade of the American suburban family man begins to crack. The truth spills out onto the cassette tape. Hansen admits it.
I suppose this is the end.
He says he was under massive pressure at work. His boss had humiliated him in front of his colleagues earlier that day. He felt powerless. He felt castrated by the corporate machine. He was driving around the dark roads, boiling with silent, unexpressed rage. He pulled over to relieve himself on the side of the road, and he saw the boy riding his bike. He didn't know Mirko. It was an entirely random encounter. But in that split second, this quiet, unassuming man decided to take back his power by completely destroying someone weaker than him. He grabbed the boy. He threw him in the car. He said he just wanted to feel the power of someone being terrified of him. But the boy fought back. The boy screamed. And Hansen, terrified that his perfect life, his job, and his marriage would be ruined if the boy got away, killed him. He drove out to a frozen marshland and buried the body in the freezing mud, leaving the boy out there for 146 days while he went back to work, kissed his wife, and mowed his lawn. Because of the detective's psychological maneuvering, Hansen eventually breaks completely and draws them a map. He leads them right to the makeshift grave. The task force is finally able to fulfill their promise. They bring Mirko home to his parents. Gert Hansen was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But when you close this archive file, when you look at the faded Polaroid of that Volkswagen station wagon and the typewritten transcripts of the confession, the most chilling part of this entire case remains the gap in our societal understanding of violence. The terrifying reality that this investigation uncovered is the price of the suburban illusion. We are conditioned to look for monsters in dark alleys. We expect killers to look like outcasts, drifters, or madmen. But Gert Hansen was the epitome of the 1980s corporate American dream. He was a product of a culture that demanded absolute conformity, success, and emotional suppression. He absorbed the stress, the humiliation, and the pressure of his daily life, and he had absolutely no healthy psychological valve to release it. He masked his internal rot with a company car and a family home, right up until the moment it exploded into unspeakable violence against an innocent child. This case wasn't just solved by the sheer willpower of 300 freezing cops, or the experimental thermal cameras of the Air Force, or even the primitive cellular pings that mapped a killer's route. It was solved because one detective understood that the darkest, most depraved secrets aren't hiding in the woods. They are hiding behind the polite, friendly smiles of the people living right next door. And until we realize that, we will never truly know who is driving past us in the dark.